This is a story about two men on one journey, 72 years apart. The first man is Alphonse Hustinx. He was a Dutch journalist who set sail for southern Africa in 1934, a journey that took nearly 3 weeks in those days. He arrived in Cape Town armed with a 35mm film camera and a love of travel.
He was really quite a famous photojournalist. He traveled the world, including his Africa trip. This guy just looked exactly like Tintin. You know, the socks and the pith helmet and...
The second man is ObieOberholzer, one of South Africa's best photographers who is not only well known for his eccentricity, but also his immense visual artistry.
The first picture I took is when my mother, her avid traveler, took me to Pisa. And I looked through this camera and I put the Tower of Pisa straight and all the other buildings fell over. That's when I knew there's something.
Hustinx spent 7 months on the continent. In black and white film, he captured unique historical photos and moving footage of southern African places, from the Cape of Good Hope to the Victoria Falls. His 2-hour travel documentary called The 7 Wonders of Southern Africa was shown extensively in the Netherlands during the Second World War till 1944. During occupation, Hustinx hid from the Germans for several months. By that stage, the film had gradually fallen to pieces due to wear and tear and was discarded in the attic of his home for over 60 years.
It was a Dutch publisher who unearthed the film Hustinx had made on the 7 miracles of South Africa and approached Oberholzer to retrace his footsteps over 70 years later.
The publisher spliced the film together again and it was all digitally remastered. The footage reveals a very different South Africa.
72 years later, doesn't sound a lot, but 72 years in South Africa is a long time, because a lot has happened from the 30s to the 21st century.
No stranger to dusty roads and isolated stretches of veldt, Obie set off alone in his bakkie for a 2-month journey to match Hustinx's photographs with contemporary counterparts. When Hustinx arrived in the Cape, the country was in the midst of a crippling depression and racial tensions were escalating. Used to traveling where the wind or a whim took him, Obie had to adjust to following Hustinx's prescribed journey.
There are obvious differences between their two visual styles. Hustinx shot in black and white, and Obie is renowned for his vibrant colors. But there is a synergy between the two. Both decided to follow the road less traveled. What was it about him that appealed to you?
I think that he was fascinated by this Africa. He photographed from the train window these locusts, these swarms of locusts. Now, to him it must have been fascinating that the sky darkened to see these locusts or the Zimbabwe ruins. One can't understand, we understand the Zimbabwe ruins, but for a European to see these ancient buildings, precise measurements, it's fascinating. So he was in awe of his surroundings, its greatness, its vastness. You know, I still can't photograph the Victoria Falls. How do you photograph the Victoria Falls? It's just too big, too vast. He was interested in reflecting people in places where the landscapes still reflect in people's faces. That would interest me, and I think same for him.
Although Alphonse Hustinx died over 50 years ago, Obie often chatted to the spirit of Al, as he called him, while driving around the country and updating him on the changes that have happened in South Africa.
Freedom is coming to a T-junction and stopping and saying, well, I think I'll go left.
Hustinx was a traditionalist and, as a foreigner, largely interested in the tourist spots. Obie, on the other hand, revels in the humor and unpredictability of our country. He loves real people like the whites, who are farmers in the Eastern Cape. The isolated Georgian house, which was built in about 1840 as a testimony to all that is British, stands miles and miles from any city in wide open scrubland.
Yeah, we'll shoot it if you would struggle to do the same in the USA or in Germany, you would get blocked. And here it's still so free. That's it.
For 32 years, ObieOberholzer has traveled the dusty roads of Africa. He has published 8 books of his travels with humorous titles like To Hell and Gone and Round the Bend. But it was perhaps his first book cover with Oma Roos Klute that made his pictures recognizable across South Africa.
Oma Roos Klute with her pink kappie lived off the beaten track in Namakwaland. A captivating photograph was the front cover of Obie's first book.
And one day I found myself driving into Hustinx again. And there she was sitting on a stoep. And the same kappie. That's 3-4 years later. And I said, "Hello, Oma." She said, "Coffee." "Yes, coffee, it's right." And then I chatted about life in Hustinx and I took another picture of her holding the book.
Obie used her expressive face on 3 of his book covers. He recently went back to give her the last photograph, but she was not sitting on her stoop in the pink kappie when he pulled into town.
The last time, after 12 years, I drove back with a print of her holding these many books. And I got this feeling that she was passed on. And she's in the graveyard. And then I went to a graveyard. I found her grave amongst the plastic flowers and those round, funny things that sort of fade and crack. And I left her the picture there on her grave and said, "Rest in peace, Oma Roos Klute."
Through Obie's offbeat pictorial journey, the contrasts are apparent. Changes in transport, technology, industrialization, and urbanization. But for him, the most apparent and profound difference is democracy.
But I think that changed when Nelson came down from heaven via Robben Island and called us all rainbows. That was the biggest shift for me.
The book, Long Ago Way, is a culmination of Obie's journey with Hustinx. He believes that we so often want to see the sights overseas without ever exploring the richness and texture within our own borders.
They haven't traveled to the Richtersveld or traveled to Ottersel or Groot Swart Witpens Bokfonteinberg. Cheers, Alphonse. I try to make people aware of how beautiful and how different and how contrasting our country is.